Hello, listeners. Hello, tribe. This is Books, Beer, and Networking. This is a recap of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People that took place. Again, the author is Stephen Covey, and this took place yesterday, March 28th at Moe's Irish Pub. But that all is about to change, and I have my partner here today. As always, without him, there is no book club. So we have Jackson Buboltz with Elevated Insurance. How you doing today?
I'm excellent, Rob.
All right, that's awesome. We just came out of a networking event at Bar Louie, and we'll get into that a little bit because we have a new sponsor and a new location. But before we get into all that, let's talk about 7 habits of highly effective people. Yes, we did come from happy hour at noon. So go ahead, Jackson. Go ahead. I'll let you start it off.
Yeah, so 7 habits, highly effective people. I mean, there's a lot of people, Rob, that I think will talk about this book as if it's their Bible, right? Their kind of right-hand book. I read this book, once every 2 years or 3 years, that kind of thing. And it's because it is just packed with highly effective, highly useful information. This is, in my opinion, Rob, this is the most studious, text-like, kind of dry book that's on the book list this year. I mean,
I agree with you.
And I was a little bit, I really didn't know what to do with this book because it is one of the books that's changed my life. It's been highly impactful. I've read this book over a dozen times, but it is a little bit textbook style. So in the spirit of the textbook style of the 7 habits, I thought maybe we could just go through, hey, this is in a nutshell what the 7 habits are, talk a little bit about what our conversation yielded and talk about the next book that's coming up. And
you made a great point, Jackson, that this is textbooks and everybody gets a little bit something different out of the books that we read each month. And, this was brought up in one of the last events where David Lardnos he goes, I didn't really get into the book, but I got more out of the conversation than I did reading the book. But after reading the book, he got more out of the conversation. And that's how I was with this book. I've read it several times, and I actually got more out of the conversation than I did get out of the book. It's not my favorite, but I did read it. And, it's, there's some really good takeaways on it. There's always some nuggets that you can get away out of it. But it's all about that conversation at the end when you come to these events. And, I'll emphasize that you do not have to read the book.
Highly encouraged.
It helps, but you don't have to read the book. Out of the several people that were there March 28th, there's a few people that showed up that didn't read the book, but they took away a lot out of it. So
I think so. And I also think, too, it's a nice validation if you maybe aren't so sure about a book club, right? Maybe you don't think you're that square or whatever it is. By hanging out and having a conversation, hearing what everyone else thought about it, it might inspire you to pick that one up. It might inspire you to read the next one and get into that conversation. So if you're at your computer, I would encourage you to quickly Google the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People graph. And what you're going to see is kind of this pyramid with another pyramid standing on top of it upside down. The whole idea is Stephen Covey does a great job of visualizing this is what we're working on these 7 habits. And you can't get to step 6 or 7 without first going through 1, 2, and 3. So the first 3 steps are private victory. And he talks about these are really things that are inside of ourselves that no one else can help us with except for the paradigm that we view the world in. So the first one is being proactive. So that's saying it's up to me to make a change. No one else is responsible for where I am. No one's helped me get here. Where I am is where I am because of my choices, and where I go moving forward will be because of my choices. So step 1 is being proactive and taking that ownership, which then moves into step 2. Okay, if I'm going to have ownership, if I'm going to essentially be the author, what's the script? So begin with the end in mind is thinking about where you want to be and then moving through that process to get where you want to go.
Yeah, I mean, those are a lot of great things that you said in there. And you really have to take into account to this book is like, you have to really look at yourself and look in the mirror and what you're doing and reflect on yourself of, where you're going and choose those those personal victories and what you want to do with your life, and thinking with the end in mind. That's something early on when I first read this book didn't resonate with me. I'm like, why should I think with the end in mind when I don't know what I'm doing right now?
Sure.
And that's one of the things when I first read the book, I was like, why should I look a month, 2 months, 3 months, a year, 2 years down the road, and when I don't even know what I'm doing right now? And that's something that was 15, 20 years ago. But now when I reread it, I'm going, it makes sense. Now if you look a point on a map, if I'm in Milwaukee and I'm traveling to LA and I'm driving in a car, I have that endpoint. And now I know I need to look at my map and I know how to get there and what I got to do. And a good thing that I've learned is that you could drive all night long, but you're only going to see 200 feet in front of you. And that's really key because that's all you really need is to see that from. You know where you're going, but just focus on that little bits to get there.
Right. So step 2 is knowing, okay, I'm going to LA. That's where we're headed. And then step 3 talks about putting first things first. So, to stick with Rob's analogy, that might mean being sure you have fuel in your car. That might mean making sure that you're packed and having snacks and not just leaving. So I think in the world that we live in today where everyone has a cell phone in their pocket, there's always a distraction available. What's most important? And that's what steps 3 is putting first things first, prioritizing what's most important to help you get where you're going, understanding that you're in control of getting there, and beginning. So that kind of wraps up the first half of the 7 habits where we're looking at what can we do. After that, once one can stand on their own and once someone can be proactive and responsible for their own choices, then we can start to leverage those things within our social circle. So that might be within our family, that might be within our workplace, that might be in the greater networking world that we're in. But being able to be influential by really having that confidence in yourself and then being able to bring that to other people. So think win-win is a big one. And we just talked about earlier today a conversation I'd had with a vendor that I'm looking to partner with for the elevated kickoff to summer picnic, which is happening later this summer. And we were talking about, hey, if we're going to have a catering marketing partnership, how does that work? And I began the email saying, I don't want to do anything unless you think this is a really good idea and I think this is a really good idea. And being able to talk about win-win on the front end helped us iron out some of those things to get to where we want to be, where now we know that we will have delicious catered food available at the event later this summer. So think win-win, being able to not only understand what you want, but also understand how to make that help the other person. Seek first to understand, then be understood. Rob, you have anything on your listening skills you want to share with the crowd? All you do is talk in this. I
do, but the whole process of being, interviewing people is to listen. And, I learned this a long time ago because initially when I would talk to people, I would gear myself to defend myself. And it was just a natural reaction. So I had to learn to listen and not be, reactive to what the other person is saying. But now being able to listen to an individual when I'm either interviewing them or I'm doing a one-on-one or meet them as a new client is more important than anything you'll ever have to say, because by listening, you'll truly understand what that person is saying and where they're coming from. And regardless of what situation it is, how you can help them in a sense of way, So there's so many different. You could create an entire podcast on that particular subject, but it's just a matter of sitting back and listening to that individual next to you without having any preconceptions of what they're saying.
I think one of my big takeaways from step 5, which is seek first to understand, then to be understood, is when someone says something that perks your ears up and maybe you don't agree with it or you feel passionate about it, to take a deep breath and say, well, I guess I don't really understand where you're coming from. Can you help me understand why you feel that way? That allows you to signal to that person that maybe you don't understand, but also that you don't want to have an argument about it. You like to better understand where they're coming from. They may or may not win you to their side of seeing things, but if one can understand how the world views an issue and it's different from yours, that's a great opportunity to strengthen the cause that you're trying to promote.
And that's really what you just brought up there, Jackson. It was really relevant to this entire book club that we have, Books, Beer, and Networking, is when we read these books and when we're having conversations, is that we are seeking to understand other people through the eyes of other people. And, that's how this all comes together, is that when we sit down as a group, you read a book, I read a book, these other people read a book, and they all bring different perspectives. And I think that's one of the key points is, like, we come together, like, we learn so much from that.
Absolutely. And I think, Rob, that was a great way to roll into synergize, which is step 6. So someone who is very immature emotionally may show up to a situation saying, I need this, I need you to help me with this, make this happen. Once we've moved through these first 5 steps, we roll into step 6, which is synergize. And this is what networking is about. Like, look, I can go out and 1 + 1 makes 2 all day long. That's not hard. That's just everyone doing their job. But looking at synergize, and we had a lot of conversation about this at the book club yesterday, is talking about if 1 + 1 = 2, I don't want to be part of it. If 1 + 1 = 4, okay. Now, not only am I fulfilling my needs, that other person's getting what they need, but the end product is way beyond what either of us could have done on our own. And the beauty of this book is saying that is the final product. That's what we're all aiming for, but it takes a lot of work individually and with our teams to move to a space where we can get in a room and have those, more than 1 + 1 outcomes. And
it's got to be a collaboration where, like you said, when you begin, it's the win-win. So you got to have that on both the sides, and that's where that synergy comes from.
And if you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking, you know what, this is nice that you guys do this, but I already have all this stuff down, perfect. That's where something like book club comes into play, because it brings us to the final habit, which is habit 7, sharpen the saw. It's saying, hey, you might be really good at this, but I bet you're probably not the best person in the world. You're probably not even the best one in this networking group or this book club at this thing. So if we can consistently be putting ourselves in spots that maybe make us a little uncomfortable, it's reading something that is more challenging than we've read before, it's hanging out with people who have a different mindset or opinion of things than we're used to. By taking that risk, I believe what we're finding is we're seeing people coming out of their shell. We're seeing, I mean, I don't want to name names.
No, but it was really cool. I mean, there was a lot that came out of yesterday, and that really inspired me that we're doing something good here.
It's been really neat, just even though this has been just 3 months, seeing some of that emotional growth coming out of people and seeing people doing things that are, 6 months ago they probably wouldn't have felt comfortable with, and now they're raising their hand saying, yeah, I might be able to lead that. So it's been a really great opportunity to, full disclosure, most of the books on the book list are, between Rob and I, we've read all of them, but we're getting to share things that have impacted our lives, and we're getting all this amazing feedback from people of how it's impacted them, which is way beyond what we get out of the book one-to-one.
It's much more than we ever expected.
I would agree.
It really is. And, when we sat down and like last December or so, when we started to figure what we were going to do with this, this is super exciting, and I look forward to this every single month.
And speaking of looking forward to every month, let's talk about some updates that are happening with the next book club. So,
okay, all right. So let's start with the next book for April, which is
The Alchemist.
The Alchemist
by Pablo Coelho.
Okay, so explain a little bit about this. This is a book I have not read, and you have read.
Oh, okay. So this is one of my favorite books ever. It's on a lot of top 10 book lists. It is a parable. So the idea is it is a work of fiction that ties in a very strong meaning. And what we see here is a young man who has a goal. He's heard about this treasure at the pyramids, and he's out trying to find this treasure. And as you may have experienced in your life, when you're on your journey, you have other things that are easier, sexier, more fun pop up along the way. And we get to really sit back and enjoy how this young man works through those challenges to either decide to take what's in front of him or continue on to a goal that he might not be aware of what it is, but something tells him it's important.
All right. So then we have that, and we also have some really cool, exciting news. And before I get into that, If you have Amazon Prime, a lot of these books that we're reading are free on Kindle. So I want to remind people of that. Also, Books, Beer, and Networking has a new location. We just picked up a new sponsor.